Ο επόμενος ομιλητής, ο οποίος είναι και το μοναδικό εμπόδιο μεταξύ σας και του μεσημεριανού φαγητού, και είναι ένας πολύ ενδιαφέρον ομιλητής, είναι ο κύριος Γκάνερ, ο οποίος έχει το προνόμιο να είναι ο διευθυντής ή ο προϊστάμενος ή ο μάνατζερ της Ακαδημίας της Hewlett Packard, που έχει σχέση με το project management και με το program management στην μεγάλη εταιρεία της Hewlett Packard. Κύριε Γκάνερ, το βήμα είναι δικό σας.
Right, okay. Hello, and I'm really honoured to be here. Nice to be known as the obstacle before lunch, but that is indeed what I am. And I do apologise for, again, because I will not be speaking in Greek. You wouldn't want to hear me try. So, anyway, today I'm actually here to talk about how we have built a project management capability and some of the challenges that you may face when doing that, as long as things that I would call the sort of the critical success factors. So, I'll get used to the technology in a minute. Okay, a little bit about me. I've worked for Hewlett Packard Enterprise now for the best part of 20 years. And what I do is, has already been said about our Project and Program Management Academy. I set this up a few years back following the arrangement we actually had with Cranfield University. So we had this partnership with them over a number of years. And the whole aim of this partnership was to really look at how we could gain competitive advantage through project and program management. And all of that really revolves around building a capability and how you're going to do that. And much of what we've done and what we've implemented has been founded on the research and the work together we did actually with Cranfield University. Other things that then, I've worked with PMI now as well for a number of years. Basically sort of chaired the complexity guide, something that I talk about quite a bit. Just a quick show of hands, anybody read the complexity guide? Of course, Panos, yes, Panos was part of the committee, so I would hope that he has. It was a real honour and pleasure to work with Panos on that and his contribution. And after the complexity, also then worked on things such as the PMCDF, the new version which should be published very soon, and currently working on the OPM standard with Carl, who's also going to be speaking later this afternoon. So that's a little bit about me in the background, and later on I took on the role as professional development as Johan sort of persuaded me that it might be a wise thing to do. So I think he's here and he'll be talking later as well. And finally, the last bit about sort of me and sort of what I've done relates back to quite a bit that I'm actually going to talk about today, which was this award that we won last year for HP. We won the Educational Provider of the Year. And that was sort of something called a development needs analysis, which is really at the heart of what you do when you're building a project and program management capability. Right, okay. A good place to start and a good question I always ask is, why would you actually choose a career in project management in the first place? I mean, when I certainly started out, I was a software development for, well, actually within the UK's Ministry of Defence. So actually sort of moving into project management doesn't seem like a sort of a logical step to do. But a lot of project managers do start out by doing other things. You know, I mean, it is widely known as the accidental profession. I mean, how many of you today, I mean, you're obviously all involved in project management. A quick show of hands. How many of you actually started out when you were at college or at school or early on in your careers and you wanted to be a project manager? Yeah, I think that sort of sums it up. Not many at all. And But I do think that that's actually changing now, and there is a sort of a desire. I mean, quite recently I was doing a presentation for a university, and I took my daughter along with me, and afterwards I said, well, what do you think? And she says, yeah, I'd love to be a product manager. And I said, product manager, yes, okay, a product manager might be a good thing to do. Obviously missed the point a little bit there. Anyway, talking about project management, these are some of my sort of favourite quotes, and I think the one in the middle probably sums it up for me. It really brings a smile to my face. It's the one by Sir John Harvey-Jones, who was the former chairman of ICI. And I'll read it for you, for those that maybe don't have visibility of the slides. Planning is an unnatural process. It's much more fun just to do something, and the nicest thing about not planning is that failure comes as a complete surprise, rather than being preceded by a period of worry and depression. I think, what more can you say, actually? I think that gets to the point. And Terry Cook Davis sort of said something as well. He said, there are no facts about the future, just opinions. So why would anybody want to get into project management? So, when we actually look then what we're trying to do, why do you set up a capability? These are just a few questions that you could ask and you need to look at, if it's actually worth doing. The key thing really is what do you deem success to be for your organisation when you're talking about projects? And I was thinking of that for ourselves and how we would sort of classify success. And one of the ways that we actually do that, very, very simplistic, high-level view, because don't forget, we deliver projects and programs primarily for clients, is to actually say, as long as we end up with a happy client and we've made a little bit of money at the end of it, that, in a way, is success for us. I mean, obviously, we want to make sure that other things happen and things are delivered on time, but ultimately, as long as we've done something that keeps the client happy and it hasn't caused us to make a loss, then that is a version of success. So you need to understand what that is for your own organisation. Ask these questions. Think about things like the budget, timescale. Are those actual issues for you? And, again, I'll bring up complexity. What makes things complex to manage? Or perhaps they're not. Perhaps they're relatively straightforward. And do you have a community of practitioners, professionals? Are those a community that, are they work together? Are they networked? Do they share the knowledge? Consider all those things. Be very sort of introspective as to what actually needs to be done. And this is just an outline or the start of just sort of some of the solutions. Because usually people say, well, give them training. And maybe not just give them training, a tool all comes in handy, And, there's an old adage that a fool and a tool is still a fool, and I very much think that that's the case. But people look for simple answers when they set up these things. So, yes, you do need training, you do need tools, and you do need a process, but you don't want to be constrained by them. You've got to understand what's important to the organisation, what the gaps are for the individuals, and what the gaps are for the organisation. And it's only when you've sort of found or realised what the deficiencies are that you can that you know where to do, and you know what exactly it is that you need to address. So here's a slide on talent management. I mean, we've had loads of stats today, and I think these support very much some of the ones that Panos mentioned earlier. 75% believe that improving project management processes will be their biggest and leading challenge moving forward. So it is very much recognised. And there was another stat, I'm not sure if it's actually on here, but I've got it in my notes, that actually about 35% of over 500 senior executives contacted actually said that talent deficiencies accounted for more than half of their failing efforts in introducing improvements in strategy. So yeah, these are recognised. There are really, really big challenges. Talent management, it is important. It can't be brushed to one side. And yet, having said that, most companies, when the things get tight and they're caused to be more efficient, introduce cuts and everything else, what goes first? It's always training. It's always training, and it's always talent management. And like that's going to solve the problem. And I think that, it's pretty obvious and pretty clear that it isn't. So, assess the situation. What is it that you've got? what are the constraints within the organisation, and actually what's important to the business. And that's why I put this little diagram here, to just try and sort of illustrate it, that it isn't always actually just delivering things to time, cost and quality that actually matters. For some businesses, that isn't indeed the most important thing. In this diagram here, I've tried to illustrate the fact that reliability is critical, actually quality is critical, maybe speed isn't, but cost is always, in most cases, going to have a significant input. But if you were, say, an aircraft manufacturer and you, it's not necessarily about how quick you get something out there. Reliability is absolutely paramount. So, but if you're a software manufacturer, it could be different. Speed might be important. Just get it out there. Let the users sort of beta test it. I mean, I think we've all been at the sort of the end of that. So, more in assessing the current situation. Yeah, look at what tools you have and the processes, how you manage that knowledge. And you know, what about, do your project managers, do they have a career path? And what is that career path? Are your projects supported by sponsors? And it's always assumed that you need to move up the maturity ladder. You know, that if we take sort of point 3 here in this particular model, yeah, okay, you could say, well, maybe we need to move to 4 or 5, but that's not necessarily always the case. You know, maturity comes with a cost. And it might be that for your organisation, the optimum place to be is just at 3 and no more. So those things need very, very careful consideration. And some of the other challenges that we face, and always drawn back to complexity, and in particular, human behaviour. Okay, so we look at sort of systems behaviour and ambiguity. Yes, those things crop up. But human behaviour, and I think, again, this supports what's sort of been said earlier today, is a major, major consideration. It cannot be overlooked. You know, some statistics sort of show that we spend 20% of our time managing and dealing with conflict. So that's 1 day a week. So we have to equip our project management community, our practitioners, with how to effectively handle conflict, how to deal with it. Then you've got all the cultural aspects. I mean, we as an organisation, we have about 10,000 practitioners covering about 75 different countries. So you know, it's not going to be the same for every community when we try and get them to adopt processes, practices, and change the way that they're doing things. So, I've broken it down anyway to these 4 components of which I've talked about already. So your tools and methodology goes without saying, you do need those. But the ones that I'll be sort of more focusing on for the rest of this is going to be the competence, aptitude, and the knowledge and the skills, which obviously includes the likes of certification. So let's move on to competency. And what is competency? And I put this diagram up here. I'm not sure how clear it is to you, but hopefully you'll get these slides sort of afterwards. And I'm sharing with you this with you, even though it actually goes back significant time. And it was something that was developed by David Hilson and Ruth Murray Webster, and it's called the PEAKS Dimensions. Now, it's not the only one, and there are others out there, but it gives a really good view, in my opinion, of how you can categorize project management and how you can look at it from a competency perspective. So if we look at the first one, which is personal characteristics, that's the type of person that you are. Not everybody is actually cut out to be a project or a program manager. So you need to sort of understand, you know, is that right for you? Is that what you want to be, and why do you want to be it? Then the experience, so what you've actually done, what you've actually acquired over the years. Your attitude, that's how you choose to respond to a certain situation. Different people choose different things, but it has a massive bearing, a massive impact. So your knowledge, that's what you've actually learned, and it can be through various means. It can be through experience, traditional types of learning, and then ultimately your skills, which is you might have all the rest, but you can't actually apply it and call it skills unless you can do all of that. So it's just trying to show really a holistic view of what competency is, and it's not just knowledge on its own, and it's going to really be how you can put it all into practice. So, but let's look at knowledge, different types of knowledge, and there's knowledge that you know that you have, and there's knowledge you don't know that you have, but there's also knowledge that you don't know that you don't know. Right. And that knowledge that you don't know is very, very important and still something that needs to be looked at. Then you've got the different types of knowledge, okay? The explicit knowledge, pretty self-evident as to what that is. But then there's tacit knowledge, which can't be overlooked. And tacit knowledge is more the knowledge that's very, very hard to articulate. It's hard to define, and it can include things such as intuition. A good example, I was trying to get this across. I was taught, if you teach somebody or try and teach somebody to swim or to ride a bike, you know, it's very, very hard to actually do that. And until you're able to practice it and try again, yes, theoretically it looks simple, doesn't it? You know, you can read how to do it, you can be told, but it takes time. It's a lot more difficult to actually get that across. And there's a lot of explicit knowledge and tacit knowledge, both of those involved in project and program management. So, next I come on to certification. And a question I get asked a lot is, does certification actually matter? Does it make a difference? Does it make you a better project or program manager? Sort of intuitively you'd say, well, yes, it does, because you need that knowledge. You need to have that. You need to have that understanding. And I say, yeah, absolutely. But surely we need more than just a sort of intuitive knowledge that it is the right thing to do. So our development needs analysis that we did, which gets sort of results on how project and program managers actually work and how they deliver results out there, shows that those who are certified actually come back with better results and better feedback than those who are not, which was really sort of reassuring for us as we sort of do promote project management, and also reassuring for PMI as well. So how do you understand those gaps? What is it that you actually need to do? Well, we've got things like a self-assessment. There are plenty out there. One we've got, I think, has got about 100 different questions on it. Sit down, the project manager and their manager, and actually go through. Be very reflective. As I mentioned before, it does have its limitations. It won't help you in the things that you don't know. And it won't help you as well, knowing how you actually put these things into practice, which again is very, very important. But you still need to do it, and it's still a good thing to do. Which then brings us on to the likes of the development needs analysis, which is all about getting feedback from those that actually witness and are able to comment on how you put these things into practice. And people say, yeah, well, we do a 360 assessment. But this isn't a 360 assessment. It's not about asking your peers. This is about how the project manager actually helps to deliver results that are important to the business. So it's only those who actually are able to witness those results and are reliant upon those results that are asked to comment and provide feedback. It sounds simple, yeah, I know it does, and you sort of think, well, yeah, we should do that, everybody should do that. But in reality, it's a lot harder to do. And I put the talent triangle there because the elements of development actually should cover all those sides of the triangle. So it's not just about the technical side, but it's also about leading, and it's also about the business and strategic side as well. So, summary slide about what it does. For the individual, it's pretty self-evident, and for the organisation, For the organisation, it helps the organisation focus on the particular areas that it needs to pay attention to. Those are always going to be key. But quite often, you don't often know who the experts are in a particular area. And they're important. You need to help them because they're going to help others to bring them on through mentoring and coaching. Now, the implementation of it, this is the part that is very, very key. Again, I've put sort of 7 critical success factors there, and it says, yeah, well, those actually look pretty obvious. You've got to ask the right people. True. And I've already said sort of who those right people are. But the right questions? Yeah, well, surely you do the right questions. But quite often, the people that are actually reliant upon the results of the project manager don't have project management backgrounds. So if you don't have a project management background, you're not going to be able to answer some technical questions about, say, scheduling and forward pass and backward pass that they're not going to know. But what they are going to know is whether or not the project manager is actually able to deliver those results that they're after. And these people are very, very busy, so don't give them a questionnaire with 100 questions on. It has to be focused. It has to be ones that they're going to have time to actually do. And the results, don't just take the results as they are. You've got to do some analysis of the results, understand why there are differences, if indeed they are. And if somebody does what we would call a flat line response, i.e. just give somebody a 3 or a 4 across the board, then how much time have they really given that? How much consideration? So you need to go back and question any results. The more time you spent actually analysing the data, the more value you'll actually get from it. Sponsor. If you don't have sponsorship for it, take my word for it, it won't happen. We made sure that we did get sponsorship for it, and it did happen. And the whole benefit side, everybody has to realise the importance of doing this. It's basically answering that question, what's in it for me? And that's for the participants, it's for the managers, and for those that actually provide the feedback. And trust me, it actually pays off. But when we started this, somebody said to me kind of like, what sort of percentage are you looking for in terms of responses from managers when they actually provide the feedback? I said, well, sort of 75% would be good. And they said, well, to be honest, from our experience, when you do things like 360, you really need to think about more like 30% is going to be realistic. So we said about making sure that that wasn't going to be the case. We weren't going to get 30%. And for about the 3,000 PMs that we put through it so far, which is feedback from about 10,000 managers and people, we've had about 90 to 95% success rate. It's all about how you implement it. It's all about all these factors here. They are all very, very important. So, this is what you get, or what the project manager will get. He'll get a whole raft of information back, which hopefully he will find of interest and of help. Now, in this particular example, it shows sort of cost as an area that he might need to focus on, and risk not too good either. But it also shows sort of which areas they might be good at, and they can therefore maybe exploit it and become mentors and coaches. But you've got to then understand the results as well. Because say for example, just because somebody maybe come back as poor at scheduling or cost, automatic reaction is to take that as read and address those as particular development needs. But it could be that they're actually bad at managing scope or negotiation or actually communicating with the customer or the client. So you can't just take the results as they are. You've got to sit down, you've got to be quite reflective and understand why the results are as they are. Then you've got the little pie chart there, which is really quite good because it shows you how you compare with what you think you are compared with what others think you are. Again, a very, very useful input and a very sort of for reflecting on areas that you need to focus. And the bottom graph is just one that shows a project manager where they are in relation to their peers and others in the same area. And the organisation, well, as you can imagine, the amount of organisational data you actually end up with, you can slice and dice this in many, many different ways. But it'll show with the organisation things that you're good at, the things that maybe you're not good at, where you maybe need to focus, and then you can do it by culture, you can do it by country, you can do it by business unit, and it just gives you that information that supports actually getting sponsorship for doing other initiatives that help you along your improvement path. And then you need the all-important development plan. Absolutely. DNA results, input into it, yes, and your self-assessment, which we've already mentioned, and of course your own sort of personal reflection, and that sitting down with your manager and what you can put in. And I put the sort of the 70-20-10 model there, which is widely accepted, and I think most organisations now adopt something similar to that. And just as a sort of a reminder, 70% is what we would call workplace learning or formal learning, whereas 20% is more the informal or social learning. It can include mentoring, coaching, etc. And 10%, just 10%, is the more sort of structured or traditional learning. And I've put in there as well a little Venn diagram, which I think needs sort of some consideration as also during these sort of discussions. It's looking at sort of the ability, so the ability of the individual, so really how good you are. And that's a combination of everything, your skills, your knowledge. But also you've got to understand what their aspirations are. Do they really still want to be a project manager? Are they aspiring to be something else? Did they fall into it by accident? Very, very key when you're actually doing this, that you don't just push people into something that they don't want to be. And similarly with engagement, how engaged are they? How committed are they? And if not, why not? Is the culture wrong? Is the environment wrong? Because those are all aspects that need to be very, very much considered when you're building out the capability. Right. And then this is really I think the big challenge. It's getting actually people to change their habits. And we realise that great, you give them the report and that's it. If you walk away and you stop at that point, very, very little else happens. People do it. And it's not because they don't want to. They even haven't got the desire to. It's because everybody's busy. Project managers have a very, very busy lives, as we all know. So you have to then look at ways of what you can do in order to try and get the habits changed. And people to do the right development and what that right development actually is. Apologies for some of these slides being out of sync, but I think that was to do with the slightly different template that I used. Anyway, the key message, I'll reiterate again, it's not just about training. And I quite like that sort of quote to the right there that's used by many, many schools. But the important thing is look at those other things. Shadowing is absolutely key. If project managers have the opportunity and the chance to shadow others, then that's a really, really, really good way of learning. And just look at that sort of pyramid, which is sort of I think established now. And the fact that just from lecturing and reading and very, very little of that knowledge is ultimately retained. But if you present it, if you teach it, and if you put it into practice, the percentage of retention are far, far higher. So when you're building what your sort of the upskilling needs to look like, take account of all of these things. See what else you can actually provide for the individuals. And at the bottom left there, I put the role-based competence curriculum. Highlighted competence because of the fact that many people have a role-based training curriculum. Well, it's taking the focus away from training to competencies and understanding what competencies you actually need. And training might just be one of the solutions or one of the things that needs to be considered. And then this brings me on to this other topic that I think is very, very important, because you need to understand, when you're doing something like this, you've got to understand is how people learn, what that learning takes place. And the fact that when you do learn, your brain forms these new connections, but those don't last if you don't put them into practice. So the whole thing around neuroscience and neuroplasticity, how the brain can be molded and be changed, is very, very important. Learning how to learn is absolutely key. And they also say sort of the timing that you do these things. So if you make your sessions interactive, great, more is likely to be retained. And the size of them. What's the optimum length? Apparently it's 20 minutes. I probably should have told you that before I started sort of this presentation, you know. So you traditionally take in the bit at the start and the bit at the end, and there's some in the middle that just gets lost. But that's what the research shows. That's the optimum time for it. And look at other things. What else can be done? Gamification. The simulations, all those now play a valuable part and valuable input into how we do our upskilling, should I say, not upscaling. And emotion, absolutely. And, you know, I thought I'd put in there about multitasking, and it goes without saying, you know, if you expect people to do just a bit of web-based training whilst they're answering their emails or in other meetings, you might as well not bother. It's just going to be a tick-in-the-box exercise, and that doesn't provide anybody with anything. Now, I do have a little video here on neuroplasticity, but I'm considering time that we've actually got, and I know everybody's going to be desperate for lunch, so I'm not going to play this. Plus, having not tried it before, I'm not actually sure about how the quality or how it's going to come across. But the link's there in these slides. If anybody wants to use it afterwards or go onto YouTube, you can actually do that. But to sum it up, it really is about showing that the brain does change and that it can change, and that we need to take all of these factors into consideration when we're doing our learning. And it's never too late. You know, age isn't a factor. We can all change. We can all learn. Those are the links. So, key, change in behaviours, answering those questions. What's in it for me? Take a critical look at all of these 5 points and the sub-bullets here when you're looking at how you're going to put things into practice. You know, we want our people to be optimistic. And I think that there was some survey or research that was done that said that people that look at age optimistically actually live longer than those that don't. So think about things like that. Get people to be optimistic. Get people to be bought in. Get people to be motivated. And ultimately, the organisation needs to be supportive. It's great doing this, but if the organisation doesn't support and provide that framework for the people, then nothing will happen. No changes will take place. So, follow up, definitely. It's not a one-off. It's not a one-off activity. You've got to keep doing it. If you stop doing it, it'll stop. So you've got to win the hearts and minds. Don't turn away. Come up with some key performance indicators of how, and think about those. And don't have the KPIs as just training that's gone through. Very, very easy to measure, but not very good actual in terms of capturing the value and the benefits. One of the ones that we actually put into place was around measuring the feedback and the amount of positive feedback after a DNA was actually done about what people had actually done and whether or not they'd improved. So I think so far it's probably about 75% of the feedback that we've got after 3 months has shown that there's been some improvement. Now it might be deemed as being a little bit subjective. Yes, absolutely agree, but it is a start and it is a measure. And you've got to start measuring things, and if you don't measure them, then nothing will happen. Then we're near the end now, but so organisational learning, how is that knowledge retained and passed on? I mean, we've all got means, and we all know about sort of the importance of lessons learned, so I'm not going to necessarily bang that drum. I mean, I think we've got a database repository that's captured about 10,000 of those particular projects, but people sometimes use that as a way of just getting it off their chest and never going back to it. You've got to get the culture in place and introduce things like get people to openly talk about mistakes that they've made and their learning. And when that can be done in a safe environment, then that's passed on, and then other people will avoid doing those mistakes. And to me, that is one of the key things that we can actually sort of take away and learn. And this is it, really. Final slide. I thought I'd put a couple of quotes here from Albert Einstein on learning and education, and I think that those are very, very relevant. And the final bit of research I was going to recall was the fact that it takes 66 days, supposedly, to break a habit and to build new ones. So, and the final summary really is that, get the knowledge, but it really is key to actually being able to apply it and put it into practice. So that's it. I am here if you want some questions, and I know lunch beckons as well. So, thank you.